like to open our last, but for sure not the least, today's panel. It's called Defense and Aerospace and Machinery. Let me introduce our speakers. Denis Gurak, who is a Deputy Director General of Ukроборонпром. Dale Tetz, former Director, U.S. Department of Defense. Thank you. And Lada Roslitska, consultant, Geneva Center for Democratic Control of Armed Forces. Well known what Ukraine has state-owned and private defense industry. Both sectors are working to strengthen capability of defense and security sector. International players demonstrate growth and need investments. Some of our panelists represent state defense sector, some private. In this regard, it would be interesting to know your strategic recipe, how to make our defense industry more attractive for Western investment, how to build partnership with Western colleagues based on mutual trust and respect, to create so-called common industrial space and technological cooperation in this field. I would propose for panelists 5-7 minutes speech, and after that it would be a question and answer session as well. Denis, I would ask you first, as a representative of state defense industry. I've been told that a lot of work has been done to bring Western investments to Ukроборонпром. Did the outcome of this work evidence that situation is developing well or systems still need to be changed? Do you see narrow places in this work? Please, floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Kabanenko. First of all, it's a great pleasure to speak before such an esteemed audience. I just wanted to ask if there is a chance that I could show a presentation or play some video. So just to make this panel more interesting, I wanted to ask the organizers to play the videos which we gave beforehand. Is it possible? This video is an example of what can be done by Ukrainian defense industry in cooperation of state and private capital for a very short time with very limited resources and the product which is interesting, which is demanded on the market, and which is investment attractive. So with this in mind, my main thesis is that actually there could be no development of defense industry in Ukraine without cooperation of state and private capital. And that's the main strategy which we should pursue. Basically, this is written in all strategic and policy documents in Ukraine, in all legislation that you take. Of course, words mean a lot, but practice and practical work mean much more. So if we look 3 years back into what was the state of defense industry in Ukraine in 2014 when the conflict started, and if we look what it is now, I can tell you that in terms of institutional structure, though it still remains the same. Not much has been done in terms of changing of legislation, but on the other hand, a lot of things were done to change the mentality, to change the approach, and to change the attitude of people who are working in the defense sector. And this has been done all together, by Ukraine together. Everybody has put its own work into doing this. And where we are now is we are ready to start, actually, as a state, as a country, mentally, we are ready to start acquiring systematic, strategic, or venture capital into Ukrainian industry. For this reason, and actually as a tool and as an approach how we can do that, UOP, Ukrlandfarming, developed a concept which is called Innovations Development Platform. This is a mechanism for doing what I just said. And the vehicle which you just saw, Phantom, is a first success story of Innovations Development Platform. This vehicle was presented at last IDEX exhibition in UAE and was awarded second place as the most innovative product. Well, for specialists, if you see the technology in this vehicle, there is nothing so brilliant in the technology itself. So technology is known, but the concept itself is very applicable to current warfare. And that's why this vehicle is already demanded on few markets. It's awaiting demonstration in 3 Middle Eastern countries already. And we see a lot of perspective. So if you don't mind, I wanted to ask to play the second video, which we gave.
Innovations Development Platform was launched in 2016 as the first Ukrainian agency dealing with incubation, financing and implementation of innovative projects in the field of defense technologies. Innovations Development Platform provides full-scale implementation management of breakthrough ideas, involves core professionals with the experience in domestic and international markets, identifies the levels of innovativeness and feasibility of projects implementation, evaluates projects' attractiveness and competitiveness on international markets, plans necessary resources and draws in scientists, developers, producers and suppliers on a partnership basis, elaborates marketing strategies, attracts investors and arranges syndicated financing of the projects, and also controls their implementation. In collaboration with the platform, the investor gets the access to high-tech and highly marginal defense technologies market. Competent experts ensure providing technological evaluation, project risk management, and comprehensive marketing of manufactured products. Being a managing partner and co-investor, Innovations Development Platform supports the investor at all the stages of cooperation, since their decision to finance a project till the completion of its monetization. Upon a decision to cooperate with the platform, the investor gets the access to the catalog of innovative projects and selects the project for financing. After entering into a non-disclosure agreement, the sides agree upon the terms of cooperation, whereas financing of the project commences once an investment contract is signed. The income of the investor is generated from the sales of manufactured products, from royalties for the usage of the intellectual property rights, and from the sale of equity rights in the project or patents. Innovations Development Platform, creating the future together.
So you see, we mentally moved from boring presentations to more or less interesting videos. I wanted to finish just with saying that this, the Innovations Development Platform is not a business project in itself. It's a tool which state can use in order to create and to sustain and to promote innovation strategy. So this is a tool which everybody can use and which would help everybody to systematically bring Ukraine to the world market and brand Ukraine as a country of brains, as a country which could be an engineering hub, as a country which is actually one of the top countries in the world for scientific school. So that's our main aim, and that's a first step which we all together did. So I hope that my words today will assure you that Ukraine is a country worthwhile considering as a partner for anybody who is interested to invest here. Thanks.
Thank you. Impressive. And I would ask one question, Denis. Could you say a couple words? You mentioned that in your speech. Could you say a couple words to explain more deeply about legislative changes to make business of state-owned defense industry more understandable for Western partners? Do you clarify obstacles here? Thank you.
Yes, definitely. There are obstacles. We're objective in that, and we, for the last 3 years, were the main lobbyists to change those obstacles. So still, unfortunately, legislation is quite archaic in terms of creating joint ventures, putting capital into state enterprises. The corporate governance issue is still remaining. But I hope that, and I know that they will be solved, because first of all, there is no other way of doing anything in this industry. Secondly, I feel that there is a consensus finally in Ukraine as to what should be done. This consensus is implemented in creation of I'm not sure what the correct English term is, but in Ukrainian it's called міжфракційне об'єднання in parliament. So it's a gathering or organization of individual MPs which pursue one goal, basically. So this organization of MPs internally in the parliament, there are now 50 of them, is created, and all of them are having one goal: to bring as much faster as possible legislative changes which are required to bring here capital. So I hope that answers. I just don't want to go specifically into details because everybody's professionals here, everybody understands what is corporate structure, what is corporate governance, and how it should function. But I hope that finally there is a consensus in Ukraine internally as to what should be done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dale, the U.S. support of Ukrainian independence, close cooperation between our security and defense sectors are very important aspects, not only for our bilateral relations, but also as a way to strengthen European security. A lot of things have been done in this field. We really appreciate that support, but I would ask you, as a skilled and experienced the US government and industry person, experienced particularly in aerospace domain, how we can bring not only quantity but quality to our partnerships, specifically in technological sphere, because the nature of this so-called new generation warfare is technological. What kind of opportunities opened for our cooperation now? What is your strategic geopolitical vision on this issue? Thank you.
Testing 1, 2. Great question. Thank you very much for facilitating and inviting me and our teams event, and especially to you as well, Dennis. Very much appreciated. Welcome. A little bit of a disclaimer, please, before I start. I do not represent the United States of America here. I am no longer active duty. I have spent many, many years as a career Department of Defense person. I was a pilot for many years all over the earth, especially in this region, doing cargo missions. I later went into the Pentagon for many years and worked strategic defense initiative programs, worked the highest levels of mission requirements definition, all of our missile defense programs, space programs, and then later was able to develop some of the most sophisticated high-altitude, long-endurance airplanes and partnerships, including the weapons for them for missile defense. A little bit later, which took about 10 years, this kind of gets to the issue of partnerships, too, that I'll talk about. I was able to put together government-industry partnerships with some of the largest prime contractors in the country to actually mature those robotic airplanes at that time for commercial purposes. And then later started working some of the toughest problems that we see today, which is access to airspace. Even though we have the best aircraft on the planet, in those days it was the high-altitude birds. Today it's the very small ones. Getting the ability to fly in airspace is a tough problem, and you read about it every day. That is a backdrop. What I wanted to say is this trip that we made here on behalf of our sponsor, Empire State Capital Partner, we were invited to bring a team of specialists with a great depth of experience in global infrastructure operations. In my case, the capabilities that I just discussed, and in other areas from Washington, D.C., and the political apparatus that we read about every day in the press. But we got an opportunity to come out here on very short notice and for a short period to talk about opportunities, using your word here, opportunities for joint collaboration for defensive applications. My background, as I said, and I repeat, is largely defense, and I'm focused on that, or was focused, and our team was focused on it here. I have to tell you, I have never been to Ukraine before, but this has been a delightful experience, and I say that sincerely to everybody here. I feel it's been a warm reception with extremely good people, and what I see here is an opportunity again for our particular mission is to work with the various elements of government here, the Ministry of Defense, you, Dennis, on your side, and other, as we call them, stakeholders, to see, number one, if there's an opportunity on our side to look at the technical evaluations of evolving concepts here, not DoD concepts, not American concepts, but regional and national projects for defense, and I'll talk about that in a second. And working in collaboration with our team, if we can do it, working with you all here, we can then look at the ability to provide external funding, augmentation, if you will, to help jumpstart some of these programs. That's my interest. Now, what I will tell you, though, just in the last 2 days, and I have been in many, many programs, both small and large, largely in the military and in NASA. And what I saw here in a very short period of time was a portfolio of very interesting, clever partnerships, some of low fidelity and others that we're moving towards, like what you saw in that video over there, which I believe the name was Phantom or something like that. That really got us as a team energized because and this is my observation, and I hope it's not offensive to you in the crowd here, but I have worked geopolitical issues for many, many years with the hope that we can use some of our technologies, U.S. and our allied or coalition or friends technologies in joint warfighting environments. That's why I spent the time and our team spent the time to come here and learn more than anything else about what's going on here in such a brief period, and to see if any of our talents, our capabilities, our networks could be used to amplify and improve and actually develop new development priorities or capabilities here. Now, the focus of my look, or our team here, was the aftermath of the Soviet incursion several years ago. And what is paramount in my view right now is the absolute explosion, if you will, and I don't mean to be dramatic about that, of robotic technologies of all kinds. And you know, we use the term occasionally, sea, air, land, and space. It's happening simultaneously. The Admiral and I just talked a few minutes ago about underwater robotic technologies for warfighting capability. That is going very fast. We didn't look at that here, but what we did look at was the rapid proliferation of technologies of all kinds for ground vehicles and air vehicles. The press calls them drones. That is happening at warp speed right now, and countries need to be prepared to defend against attacks of all kinds from those vehicles. Very sophisticated, unmanned, mobile platforms on borders or on the battlefield, and those that are going to be in the air, flown as unmanned platforms. So that was kind of the backdrop of our interest and evaluation on a case basis here. And so that being the case, I kind of volunteered to come here and talk about that, because what I visualize here, and this is my personal visualization, is that Ukraine in particular might strongly consider, and we're seeing elements of it right here, of a future largely conducting surveillance operations and attack operations with unmanned machines, robotic, supplemented, of course, by the humans at distance in various command centers. So that's what I felt I wanted to just relay to you today and not scare you, but from a person who lives and breathes this every day, I felt that it was great interest to me to even come here to talk about that, to see what's going on, what we might be able to do to help in terms of due diligence, maturing, nurturing some of these programs. When I say we now, that would be a consortia of subject matter people from highly qualified people that would work in concert with you, Dennis, and your team and others. So I hope you, like I said, are not offended by what I'm saying here, but I believe sincerely that there's an opportunity here to do not only the commercial development of these things, but as you, Admiral, said too, work the political aspects, although we don't do that within Ukraine, but what we can bring to the table too is facilitation to a degree with the U.S. government. And there are many programs. The good news is, many of you don't know this, but we have in our country joint technology development, sharing activities all over the earth. And I'm understanding that they have it here too. I wanted to take the opportunity to meet with the U.S. Embassy here, as I have done many times before on other projects, to talk to some of the officers whose job it is to are responsible for those joint activities in terms of the planning activities, et cetera. So that being the case, I just wanted to say that this has been a delightful experience for me and our team in particular, and great meeting you and you while we're here. Continue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dale, I remember my participation in 2015 in the first the US-Ukraine Business Forum. It was very interesting event because former Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, former Ukrainian Prime Minister, Arsenij Yatsenyuk, Secretary of Commerce, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker, and other officials took part in this event. It was really promise, particularly concerning defense industry. But 2 years later, one guy from the government position, one officials, said me, Igor, things not always depend on us. What is depending on us? How we can do our best to demonstrate more and more common success stories of our partnership in defense, aerospace, and machinery sphere. Thank you.
You asked me the question I could not hear. You asked me how, what my thoughts were. Yeah, no, from my perspective, it's absolutely essential for government and industry, military, nation states, United States and Ukraine to work very closely together on your particular problems here. And that's what I'm focused on here in our team. What can we do, from a national and from a commercial standpoint, to bootstrap and proceed forward with capability that you want, and then simultaneously grow your industries for domestic purposes and equally important for export. So I think that's kind of the thrust of what our discussions have been so far, albeit these are very premature. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Would you like to add something? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next question I would ask Lada, as a representative of Geneva Center for Democratic Control of Armed Forces, because we know pretty well what modern security environment is characterizing by hybrid warfare, fight for people's mindset, for their brains and hearts, overt and hidden actions, alternation, and so on. But we still continue to think what traditional military approaches can solve most security and defense problems, and often are looking for opportunities to cooperate in traditional security and defense domains. What is your vision concerning the concept of modern security? How it could look like? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And first, I would like to state that today I'm not speaking as a representative of DCAF. І я би хотіла подякувати організаторам, що так гарно.
I would like to thank organizers for very good organization and for invitation.
Security has changed a lot in the last 30 years. And the concept of security and war has drastically changed in the last 3. And a lot of this has to do with the term hybrid and hybridity. Unfortunately, I do not have tanks to show you or weapons to show you. It would be much easier for me to show you how I can kill an enemy with a tank or a gun. It's much more difficult to explain to you how it's possible to save a nation, even international organizations, by modeling the way that people feel about themselves and the way they feel about their neighbors. I'm very happy that our colleagues today have mentioned numerous times the concept of cooperative security. Security is no longer something that belongs to the state itself. We need public-private cooperation and also interagency cooperation. If we look at the European Union, for instance, the organization itself has very much difficulty cooperating in its own interests from a national security perspective. If we consider NATO's objectives also to have cooperative security, we need to focus and have investors and consultants who are able to advise on how cooperative security can overcome the stovepipes that have been developed legally and also mentally. Comprehensive security. Now I move from cooperating to actually, what do we talk about when we have security? Security is changing. The concepts are no longer just land, territory, belongings. or a military concept. We are now dealing with something called comprehensive security, which is a shift that includes environmental security, political security, which is directly resulted to national resilience, and something we need to measure. Societal security plays a major role in how we create the we identity. And I could use an example, I was going to use another example, but recently, yesterday, we saw a decision made in Ukraine that banned Yandex and Kontakti and .ru. Many people are very upset about this and think that this is a violation of human rights, and the perceptions of the state institutions and the decisions resulting from this decision are changing. Had the defense industry invested enough money and enough time in Ukraine or elsewhere to be able to trace the national resilience, to trace not only who are the trolls, but develop systems, algorithms that can give warning signs. Let the people read Yandex and Kontakti, but have a computer system, an application that will actually say your government gives this a green light, or your government suggests that this is, according to our knowledge, this is a dangerous terrorist organization. So we always have to be focusing on the fact that we have big data. We have robots, and robots aren't just little drones that are going to be flying around in masses on top of our buildings. Robots are instruments that we must use in order to develop programs that will measure and create reality, and create a reality that is based on the foundations of human rights and democratic values and principles, and corporate responsibility as well. I could go on and on, but I'll stop here.
Interesting concept. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to open our question and answers session of our panel. And I would ask our panelists one question concerning NATO standards. Because a lot of discussions, a lot of words we can hear about NATO standards. It's Ukrainian obligation because approved by our president, strategic defense. Bulletin mentioned what its obligation. Again, I would say it's our goal to achieve NATO standards up to 2020. So in this regard, that's also particular technical standards. In this regard, from your point of view, do we need to concentrate our efforts on to bring modern, standardized by NATO weapon and military techniques, or just continue to concentrate our efforts to upgrade from a Soviet Union weapon and military techniques? What could be our center of gravity, and what problems you can clarify in this way, please?
I could take this question. Again, turning to cooperative security. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting in Brussels where different countries got together, representatives of different countries, and were using different terms for the same concept. And at the end of the day, the meeting wasn't that successful. So standardization is definitely something that needs to continue to be developed. However, we have huge revolution in technological revolution. So cooperation during standardization is pivotal. And I would like to say something on that ground also with trust funds. NATO has, these are a great example how in Ukraine and also in the Northern Africa, Middle East, NATO has developed a trust fund system which in Ukraine, for instance, a program is being developed for the psychological rehabilitation of veterans. Also putting in money and needing investors, needing companies to cooperate on that. So standardization, if I'm speaking to you in English and you're Japanese, we need to have some sort of standard to cooperate with the objective of international peace.
The dual edge of the sword, though, technology is maturing so fast, and bureaucracies take time, a lot of time. So it's not only a business decision, an economic decision, it's a military decision. About, from a sovereignty perspective, can you wait for the bureaucracies at time with the types of technologies we're talking about right now? We're not talking about battleships or necessarily big tanks or something, large infrastructure, but with smaller, proliferated, distributed systems that are of all kinds that are going to be out there. It's just an issue but you're absolutely correct, Admiral. It has to be addressed, but the time value of decision and indecision of the bureaucracies has to be put right on the table day one.
I'll be short in this regard. So, so standards issue is the one piece of the puzzle. How would you change the system? But I think it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. I can claim that 100% because I have experience in working on bringing European standards in another industry in Ukraine, in pharmaceutical in particular, and I can see and tell you how the progress happened there. So it was also a huge industry for Ukraine in Soviet times. It remained huge industry now in Ukraine. It's also very investment attractive. Now, why? Because over the last 10 to 15 years, there was a strategy which everybody realized in that sphere that there is absolutely no way back. So the sooner and more people realize in military industry and military and security sector that there is no way back, and the sooner they will put as much resources as possible to it, and I think the better it is. So that's an absolute must, and standards themselves are not saying NATO standards if to primitivize everything. Yeah, that's not something like you say it should be done. It's not a difference in technology. It's a difference in approach. It's a difference in mentality. How do you do things? How do you approach the life cycle of weapon? So there is nothing hard in that, and I think crucial element of all the Western and Ukrainian cooperation should be putting as much resource as possible to educating everybody in the security sector what is NATO standards and how to implement them as fast as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. One more question I would allow to ask myself. Ukraine has a strong technological legacy from past, from Soviet Union time. Ukraine produced up to 40% of former Soviet Union high-tech products. How we can bring together our efforts, how we can use this potential to create modern products, I mean, not only in terms of this new generation of hybrid warfare for battlefield, but based on dual-use technologies and based on, in the best way, using our technological legacy. Based on your experience, what's your recipe in this regard? Please.
Well, for me as a person who 3 years ago didn't have anything in common with defense and defense industry, I was just a person who knows what's international business and what relations. I was amazed when I came here, what do we actually have? Everybody knows that we have something, yes. If you're not in the industry, you think, well, Ukraine is huge, it has planes, ships, rockets, space, whatever. So everybody knows that there is something, but how to use it, nobody knows. I can tell that the recipe is very simple, but the approach should be aligned with the current geopolitical threats. And the easiest way to use it, this technological background of Ukraine, is to show to the West that our industry could be a tool for winning a geopolitical war in terms of global military competition. So basically, we can be a partner for US, France, whatever, a production partner, engineering partner, an R&D partner to design and produce products which would be competitive on the world market, on those markets where Russia is present, because Russian influence in the world is, everybody knows this, is based on military power, whether it's military supplies or it's military attack, right? So the sooner we offer those markets which are used to cooperate with Russia solutions, how they can buy products cheaper, how they can be safer, how they can be assured that the general streamline and the strategy of that country would be in line with the West, the sooner we can use our capacities to the full extent, you know? Because our capacities are so huge. They're not used even for 10%, I would say. So that's, I think, the rest. The recipe is quite simple, so it's...
Thank you, Dale. Do you have some ideas in terms of that, Jan? Thank you.
No, I really don't have much to add, except as I'm learning, I understand you have huge amounts of infrastructure here that, for a variety of purposes, depending on what the deal is. As you and I talked about previously, too, the space capability, space manufacturing of rockets and engines and other things with it is impressive. The challenge is how can that be leveraged here for international benefit and your benefit? That takes some smart business operations.
Ukraine is doing a pretty good job moving with transparency. And it's doing a rather poor job with public relations and publicity. This morning, the Atlantic Council gave out an article written by a friend of mine and great patriot and journalist of Ukraine, wrote at the Atlantic Council that Ukraine's number one enemy is not Putin. Ukraine's number one enemy is the perception Ukrainians have of themselves and of their industries. And if we have in Ukraine investment in strategic communication directed at the development of business and national identity, that would be a huge milestone following the transparency aspects.
Thank you very much. From my personal experience, I think what technological sphere, high-tech technologies, it would be the one of domains there we have in Ukraine a huge attractiveness for Western investments. So I would propose to ask questions from our audience, ladies and gentlemen. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, please. Please, yeah.
Thank you very much, Bohdan Kupic, KM I have the privilege of working with Admiral Kabanenko, so I wish he would say a little bit about the work he's doing, because I think it's very important. But my question is that the conflicts of the future are changing rapidly, and you have cyber, you have capabilities which were unheard of 10, 15 years as far as, warfare is concerned. So Ukraine has tremendous human capital. Ukraine has tremendous IT development, engineering, software. And this can be redirected to defense and security purposes, which Ukraine needs, but the rest of the world needs as well. So what are your ideas in this area?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. Would you respond?
So I'll jump to the mic here. From my perspective here outside of Ukraine right now, you're spot on. Cyber threat is proliferating faster than anyone can. How do you contain it and control it's a different matter. But having centers around the earth that are doing advanced research, development, counter operations, you name it, is imperative. So to me, it's not an issue of should you do it or not, you have to do it. And you got to work with your partners, too, that you trust. So in that vein here, I hope that answers your question to a degree from my perspective.
So, taking into account what Lana said, that everything's robotic, cyber, whatever, IT in future, I just wanted to comment that a few days ago I watched a video of TED speech of a renowned mathematician of today, who is considered a Adam Turing of today. So he was speaking about what principles and methodology should be put into artificial intelligence and robots in future for them not to harm people, you know, to avoid the cyber apocalypse or whatever, artificial intelligence apocalypse. So the methodology was quite simple, which he offered, but comparing to that and decreasing the view to simply defense industry and future of warfare, I think with all these capabilities that world today has, we should concentrate on developing something, some technology which would prevent people from wanting to fight. I think that's totally possible. I hope it's not too futuristic, but that's, I think, the ultimate aim of what people should think of. And maybe we will be able to accomplish that during our lifetimes. I hope for that.
Yeah, thank you for your explanation. Lada, what do you? Okay, thank you.
Again, forming trust building, that we identity is key, and again related to strategic communications. In response to what Ukraine could do, I believe that Ukraine has lived 70 years or so in the Soviet Union and is very, very, very well versed with Kremlin tactics. Tactics which may be perceived in Western democratic states as conspiratorial. And Ukraine could invest in developing groups of professional consultants very well versed on Russian or Kremlin tactics, so-called hybrid warfare, which is actually just warfare played on the various levels of the chessboard, as Joseph Nye said. So focusing on investing into Ukrainian experts who know much more at times than they know themselves, because the West has not needed their expertise yet.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. You would ask?
Yeah, so basically Ukraine is now buying bullets produced on the occupied territory, then sold to Bulgaria or Hungary, back to Ukraine. So the question, why we do not produce the bullets ourselves, and is there any plan to open such a factory so we do not buy it basically from our enemies right now? Thank you.
The answer is quite easy. If to be short, because if to answer broadly, it would be a separate conference topic, I think. But if to be short, as far as I know, we're not buying anything from the occupied territory. I assume some illegal transfers could take place, but that I'm not the person who can answer that. If you have relevant information, please give it as soon as possible to State Security Service. Secondly, for the business side of the issue and for development and international activity in this regard, for which I'm responsible, I can tell you that there is a lot of interest, first of all, for foreign investment into creating a plant in Ukraine for production. We have a program, specific investment program, which we offer to people under signing an NDA, so condition. It's quite simple, it's very understandable for professionals, And lastly, there is a state policy which ammunition should be produced, and the priorities are set in the document which is called the Program for Development of Ammunition until 2021. It's a classified document, but nonetheless, there is a state strategy. We can work on it, also with international investors, and the work is happening now. So, so if I foresee the aim of your question is whether we are capable of sustaining and fighting the war with our ammunition, with the ammunition, and if there is a lack of ammunition or something like that, I can assure you that there is no lack of ammunition. So everybody in the state who is responsible for that have consensus as to what should be done, and the things are done at this very moment. That's like this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, please.
US-Ukraine Foundation. We've heard a lot of talk about cooperation, trust, expanding or developing the defense sector, not just for the benefit of the international community, international peace, but also as a producer of wealth in Ukraine. In any other sphere of international investment in Ukraine, the issue of protection of intellectual property rights arises. In other words, courts and the implementation of the law. How much is this a problem in this sector, particularly a sensitive sector that's key, obviously, by definition, to national security? Turning to the US participant, do you see this as a barrier whereby a lot of American potential investors will be circling around Ukraine, but taking a waiting position to see until we have a rule of law applied here consistently, particularly as it relates to intellectual property rights?
With all due respects, I really can't comment on that.
I know quite a lot about Ukrainian legal system and IP law in particular, and I can tell that, as in any other sphere, there are things to do, and there's always room for improvement, for sure. But the legislation itself, as it is, to the formal side of the issue, is mature. So it is completely in line with Western standards, the legislation itself. The other question, how it works, but and in this sphere in particular. So I think the answer would be that it works to some extent, that international partners, US in particular, draws a lot of attention to IP protection, and this is one of the main issues which are raised on the political and diplomatic levels when there are government-to-government talks of Ukraine and US. So as far as I know, in the MOD, or in all other institutions which are receiving US help, which are somehow connected to this issue that you're saying, everybody is aware that this is crucial for being able to become a part of the global system, you know, so I believe that there is consensus as to that.
Thank you. Couple more questions? No questions. I would ask you one more question. Today we spoke about some attractive areas of investments, for investments in defense industry, in Ukrainian defense industry. Could you clarify from your perspective three most important prioritized spheres attractive for example, the US business, foreign business, Western business, and what Ukraine could propose for Western investors, please?
Okay, so this is rather easy. It should be also, the interest should be in line, right? So there always should be win-win. So West should receive some strategic benefit from investing here. So three spheres are quite simple. First is aviation, is Antonov and its capabilities, because it's strategic capability. Second is ammunition production, and third is cyber. So I think that these are top three. They're all quite investment attractive. I cannot say that there could be, well, probably for cyber there could be some venture capital scheme or model used, but for ammunition and for Antonov or aviation in general, probably there should be a strategic investor. And that should be an interest of strategic investor from the West.
Yeah, thank you. Dale? No? Lada?
I would just add one, and this again pertains to consulting. Ukraine has a lot to offer as far as it is psychological operations, understanding them, planning them, creative industry development and use in building national resilience. Ukrainians are very well versed on that.
Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, any questions more? Yeah, thank you. Yes, yeah, today we spoke about a huge Ukrainian potential, attractive for investments in different spheres, also about existing problems of legislation, the implementation of legislation, because it's a big difference between legislation approved and implementation of the law, particularly in defense sphere. But I think many aspects, a lot of aspects depend on us, depend on our activities, depends on our common efforts, and I think we have to clarify one more important thing: what we can do more, and of course we have to do more, because common threats, common, not easy, difficult hybrid, so-called hybrid warfare, new generation warfare environment, and we can meet a lot of threats, challenges, only bring together our efforts. It would be effective response, comprehensive, cooperative response. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to our audience for your very good questions. I wish you all the best. See you. Thank you.